Welcome back, friends, to the second part of the chronology of action. Links to earlier videos are in the description. Once again, I am grateful to those benevolent souls who have tried to teach me such topics. Please do like and share with others who may be interested. Further, your comments and feedback are most welcome. Thank you. In part 1, we saw that action is the insignia of life. All beings undertake action continuously through their body, mind and intellect. And action cannot be avoided even for a moment, which the Gita affirms in chapter 3 verse 5. Our activity is for a singular goal, the attainment of happiness. Now we will look at how we act in greater detail. Life is Anubhav Dhara, a flow of experiences. Each experience is made up of the experienced, or the world of objects, and the experiencer, or the individual, made up of 3 bodies and the underlying pure consciousness facilitating awareness. We need to see how the 2 aspects interact. Interaction with the world at large occurs through our senses. We have 5 Jnanindriya, or organs of perception. The 5 sense organs through which the outside world enters us, and 5 karma indriyas, or organs of action, through which we respond to the outer world. When we contact the world, we receive stimuli by way of color and form, sound, smell, taste, and touch, corresponding with each of the senses. These inputs create sensory impressions which are registered in the mind and stored as memory. The reaction in the mind to the sensory impressions is one of either liking or disliking. Temporary happiness arises when the mind's demands are met. Unhappiness results from the mind not being satisfied. Accordingly, instructions go to the 5 organs of action to work either to get more of the sensory stimuli which the mind liked, or to avoid those which were disliked. So the organs of action try to gratify the insatiable mind, a thankless and never-ending task. Not only are the things the mind likes ever-changing themselves, but also the mind is fickle. Something we like today, we may not like tomorrow. This is the circle of receipt, reaction and response, and is how we function. If this wheel is not checked and the mind is allowed to continue its cravings, it will be harmful, as is the case in any addiction. There has to be a control mechanism. The intellect must be involved so that it may discriminate over the mind. A sharp intellect has to be developed so as to keep the endless demands of the mind in check. This is the proper way to function, where the intellect is not bypassed but action is under its scrutiny. Let us take the example of Lord Ganesh and his rodent friend. Lord Ganesh represents the Sthita Prajna, the state of human perfection as narrated by Krishna to Arjuna in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Ganesh is shown with large ears. Traditionally, knowledge was passed by word of mouth and acquired by listening to one's guru. Thus, knowledge is accumulated and then reflected upon, called manan or contemplation, leading to wisdom, hence the large head. From this emanates the trunk, a sharp, discriminating intellect. One broken tusk indicates that such a person has overcome the pairs of opposites of the world, the likes and dislikes, the raga dvesh, which hinder man's progress. The large stomach represents being able to absorb whatever the world throws up without being disturbed. One leg up, one leg down indicates that such a person functions in the world yet has his focus on higher ideals. Lastly, the mouse, which normally is always fidgeting, yet here it sits still, signifying a mind that is calm, seeking permission from the intellect to partake in the sweets of the world, the ladus. For a more detailed description of such symbolism, I refer you to The Symbolism of Hindu Gods and Rituals by Sri A. Parthasarathy. The link is in the description. And to to a future video of mine on the topic, so do subscribe to this channel and activate the notification. So, it is the intellect which should always sanction our action and behavior, not the cravings of the mind. The mind will always want more, even at the cost of harm. One more drink for the alcoholic, a little more cake for the diabetic. The intellect has to be strengthened by acquiring knowledge and reflecting upon it, not knowledge for the sake of knowledge, but to make it our own. The desires of the mind, based on likes and dislikes, cannot be allowed to overpower reason. The inputs or stimuli from the outside world enter through our sense organs. A reaction occurs in the mind. With the approval of the intellect, we respond back to the outer world through our organs of action. Like any factory, the quality of raw materials and well-maintained machinery will determine the quality of the end product. Similarly, we have to be aware of the quality of the stimuli we receive. Our minds must be strong and emotionally resilient, and a sharp intellect will facilitate good judgment. All of these will affect the quality of the response we give to the world at large. It is the nature of our mind and the strength of our intellect which determines our response to any stimuli. One stimuli will have different responses from different people. To take the example of smoking again, an external stimuli which gives immense pleasure to one type of mind, yet the same stimuli has completely the opposite effect to another. The stimuli is the same, the response is different due to the nature of the mind. It is the nature of our mind and hence our personality which governs our response to any situation. The nature of our mind and thus our personality are determined by our vasanas. Further, the quality of the vasanas define the quality of our character and temperament. Let us take a quick look at vasanas, our inherent tendencies. A Sanskrit term at the core of Indian and Buddhist philosophy, it translates literally to fragrance. For example, the fragrance of food which remains in a vessel even after washing. The impression remains and determines the smell. Vasanas have been created by past actions and are latent behavioral tendencies or karmic imprints which influence present behavior and personality. Action is driven by desire. Desire comes from thought, which is triggered by vasanas. This subject requires deeper discussion, but we shall suffice with vasanas as unmanifest desires. Vasanas define our tendencies and inclinations. They are subtle and latent within us, determining our likes and dislikes. They are awakened by an external stimuli which enters through our sense organs. A thought is thus triggered. A flow of thoughts towards an object is initiated. With a strong flow, a desire arises. Desire is an emptiness we feel within us when we believe we need a particular object to fulfill us. We undertake an action in an attempt to fill this apparent void. For example, when we have a void in our stomach, we call it hunger and undertake an action to fill it, i.e., we eat. We act to obtain an object we crave for, believing that our happiness resides in it. Actions, once undertaken, have two results: either successful and our desire is fulfilled and we become happy, or unsuccessful, which leads to our unhappiness and we continue to crave for that object. With success, after the initial happiness, negative emotions creep in: greed for more, arrogance for having the object, envy for those who have better or more than we do, and fear of losing what we have. These create further vasanas and the circle starts again. Alternatively, our actions could be unsuccessful. With failure to get what we want, anger arises. Anger is nothing but the blocked flow of thoughts towards an object. Just see when a child is denied something he or she likes. The flow of thoughts, i.e. the desire for the object, is frustrated. The consequence is anger, a tantrum. Anger results in loss of control of our faculties and we become disturbed and bewildered. This again regenerates new vasanas and we are at square one again. This chain of events binds us. We become stuck in a circular treadmill attempting always to fulfill our desires and creating new desires in the process. So a desire is a flow of thoughts towards an object and a feeling of a lack of it, something that is missing from our lives and which we need to make us happy, or so we think. A vasana in me for travel could be triggered by the sight of a fancy car. My latent desire is awakened. The thought of the car persists and strengthens. The desire for the car becomes manifest. Now I have to work towards obtaining my goal. If successful, immediately the fear of loss or damage will awaken. I will be attached. In contrast, if the car is a rental, there is no attachment. It's the rental company's headache. With ownership of a swanky car, arrogance arises over someone without a car. Greed, the want of a second car, and envy for a bigger and better car. Dissatisfaction is the result, and enjoyment for the once coveted object is diminished. If my desire for a new car is not fulfilled, my flow of thought is obstructed. Anger will result. Whether an action is successful or unsuccessful, we become entrapped in this loop and entangled in the clutches of the enemies of the mind. These are Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Mad, Matsar, and the seventh, Bhai, or fear. These are considered to be the diseases of the mind, or Manarog. They bind our true self or the soul to the material cycle. They are negative characteristics which prevent man from attaining moksha or salvation. Sikhism talks of flaws in the human character as 5 thieves: pride, anger, lust, greed, attachment. These obstruct the path to spirituality as they steal one's inherent common sense. 5 opposing traits are available to defeat the 5 bandits: contentment, humility, truthful living, patience, and wisdom. In the Christian tradition, 7 cardinal sins are mentioned: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, anger, and sloth. These are to be confronted with the 7 heavenly virtues. Patanjali's Yoga Sutra lists 5 afflictions or klesha in chapter 2 verse 3: avidya, asmita, rag, dvesh, and abhinivas. These are emotional poisons which, if acted upon, increase suffering or dukh. Klesh arise on 3 levels. Intellectually, we have avidya and asmita, or ignorance and ego. Emotionally, we have raga dvesh, or attraction and repulsion. And instinctively, there is abhinivas, the attachment or clinging to life. Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. In chapter 2 verse 4, Patanjali puts avidya, or spiritual ignorance, at whatever level, as the root cause of all other afflictions. In chapter 2 of the Gita, Krishna details how the Manarog, or the 5 thieves, the 7 cardinal sins, or the 5 klesh, take us down the ladder of our own destruction. In verse 62 he states that while contemplating on the objects of the senses, one develops attachment to them. Attachment leads to desire, and from desire arises anger. He continues in verse 63 that anger leads to the clouding of judgment, which results in bewilderment of memory, and thus the intellect is destroyed, leading to one's ruin. One misses life's true purpose, happiness. The revered BKS Iyengar echoes the same sentiments and warns of the danger of sensory involvement and attachment, which eventually decays our true intelligence. In the Katha Upanishad, the Lord of Death teaches the young Nachiket both the good and the pleasant approach the mortal. The intelligent man examines and distinguishes them, for the intelligent man prefers the good to the pleasant, and the ignorant man chooses the pleasant for the sake of his body. The Buddha also explained there is suffering and misery in life, and the direct cause of it is desire or craving. We have seen that action cannot be avoided. Our past actions determine our current vasanas, which in turn direct our current actions. These govern our future vasanas and future actions. We have little influence over our existing vasanas. However, we can control the stimuli we receive and with proper discernment and judgment we can choose the response we give. It is unchecked, desire-motivated action and attachment which leads us away from the happiness we seek. Krishna declares that the intricacies of action are hard to understand, distinguishing three types: karma, vikarma and akarma. A topic for a future video perhaps. For the moment, let us suffice with verse 47 of the second chapter, where Krishna advises that we should just act, without worrying about the fruits of those actions. Patanjali, in the second chapter, advocates Kriya Yoga as the means to reduce afflictions, and breaks this down into three steps: austerity, meaning non-attachment, self-study, the internal journey, and surrender to the eternal sustainer of the universe. He further details his famous Ashtanga Yoga, an eightfold path to be free from the misery of sansar: Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam, Pratyahar, Dharana, Dhyan, Samadhi. All of these require deeper analysis and understanding, which is beyond the scope of this video. To end, let us look at what some of the great thinkers had to say about action. Aristotle, the great Greek mind, talks of happiness as a state created by acting correctly. James Allen, the author of As a Man Thinketh, declares that actions are thoughts made visible. Buddha explained that all that we are is the result of what we have thought. Emerson asserted that thought is the ancestor of action. So current vasanas, or unmanifest desires, are triggered by stimuli from the outside world, and thus desires arise. Desires push the individual to act to fulfill them. Success or failure both lead to new vasanas. Thus the circle is complete. To break this, Krishna details in the Bhagavad Gita how one should act. In chapter 2, he summarizes that the way to function is to act with indifference to the result and being mentally balanced in success or failure. Chapter 3 is an entire chapter detailing action. Inaction is not an option, but action with the mind controlled and without attachment is the way forward. I hope you found this interesting. Action is now required from you. Please like and share with others who may be interested, and do subscribe to my channel. Further, your feedback and comments are most welcome. Thank you for your time.